Hello everybody, welcome back to the Apex to Apex podcast with your host me Stanley Jones, where we discuss all things Formula 1 and MotoGP. Now you might be thinking, where have we been in recent weeks? That's basically because we've been doing our own thing, because there hasn't been Formula 1 and there hasn't been MotoGP to talk about. Yes, I could have done a podcast last week where we discuss what's going on off circuit, but I decided to take a week off of it. But now we're back. Why are we back, you ask? We are back because MotoGP returned last weekend for the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, which frankly was a dull race. I'm going to be dead honest. It was a very dull race. I just realised I'm not in the middle of the screen. Hang on. Now I am. Bring that along with me. That's better, isn't it? Yeah, it was a dull race, frankly speaking. Quite a dull Saturday sprint race. Quite a dull Sunday main race. Not as dull for me, because I was there on Sunday for the main race in the grandstand along the main straight, and we were also there on Thursday for that live press conference they did in the heart of London near Tottenham Court Road, and the Bezzecchi meet and greet. We'll get into that later on, because of course this is about the race review of the British Grand Prix. It was a tale of multiple things really, British Grand Prix, but more about that lack of racing that happened around Silverstone, about the hero of the weekend, who to me is Bezzecchi. Again, we'll go into that later on. And the problem that's happening at factory Ducati with Marc Marquez and his tyre problems, and Pecco Bagnaia and his just problems full stop in general. Now, for anyone who's watched this podcast before, especially in the video format, you know my eyes tend to dart around the entire screen. Why, you ask, does it do that? I have so many screens on in front of me right now, I get distracted and look at something that's on, like this one here. This screen has my notes on. I have my laptop here with where I see myself, which again is very weird, and a load of things like that. Anyway, we ignore that and we get on the Aprilia domination, because we haven't mentioned actually the actual race winner on the Saturday sprint race and the race winner on the Sunday main race, which was, of course, on the Sunday, Ralph Fernandez, who secured his second MotoGP victory in his career. Proper victory. I'm not counting sprint races as victories. The sprint race was also won by Ogura and Martin, which shows the levels of Aprilia domination we had this weekend in Silverstone. And the fact that, yes, the factory team won it on Saturday, but it was Trackhouse again beating them on the Sunday, as they continue to prove they can match the factory team weekend by weekend. It shows how strong the Aprilia team are right now, and also how far away Ducati, especially the factory team, can be when they haven't got the bike in the correct window. Now, I said Martin won the sprint race. He got that early on, and apart from that, nothing much happened behind him in the sprint race itself. Since sprint race was kind of a race of attrition, as was Sunday, but it was Fernandez who led from lap 1. He got the lead at turn 1. From Martin, who was the pole sitter, ahead of a lap from him as well to get pole position. But Fernandez did jump him at pole position and led from the opening lap, pulled out a gap to about 4 seconds. 4.5 seconds, I think, was the biggest the gap got in the race. No one can get near him, and it was a circuit that really suited the Aprilias perfectly, as we kind of predicted. On the same weekend, though, you look at the Ducatis, where some people thought, how come, Marquez has got the gap from 100 points down to 18? How can he continue this recovery really he's had this year? And Ducati couldn't. Alex Márquez was fighting for a podium and was in the podium places until he made a mistake which dropped him out of the podium places. But apart from him, no other Ducatis could do anything. Di Giannantonio got Marc later on in the race, and you think, where was Marc? Marc finished 9th in the sprint race, and I think in the main race finished down in 7th as he got passed by everyone, as the factory continued to struggle with the tyre deg and the setup of their bike itself. As he said, if it's not in the correct window, they're nowhere. And it was a weekend where even Marquez couldn't pull out a result where only he could when the alien side kicks in. But he's also learned that sometimes finishing 7th is far more important than getting the points than pushing and hitting the dirt. We'll get into that a bit later on. But as I said, Sunday was a race for attrition, and also what I noticed again, so we were sitting live in the grandstand along the main straight, and you can see it's amazing seeing the ride-height devices. I still hate them, but they're still very good pieces of engineering. But as they went into turn 1, the reason why Martin actually was further behind Fernandez coming out of the turn 3, 4, 5 complex on the opening lap was because the ride-height device for Martin and Ogura in turn 1 stayed down. So they went into turn 1, both of them sparking, and Martin went very wide, right at the edge of turn 1. Both of them sparking, ride-height device stayed down. You could see as they leaned into turn 2 that they're still walloping the floor, basically. Because turn 1, you don't have to brake that hard on a MotoGP bike, and those two didn't, and it didn't disengage. Now, I'm glad the ride-height devices are gone, but it was interesting to see in real life the sparks are vicious in person, much more vicious than it looks on TV. But that's why Martin and Ogura dropped down the order in the opening laps, and had to fight their way back, which Martin could do as he secured second place in the end. Again, quite a dull ride for me, but he got done by a perfect move by Marquez. Both of them did in exit at turn 4. Marc got both of them, but then the same opening lap round Copse corner, Martin got Marc back to 3rd. Then a few laps later, would hunt down his team at Bezzecchi, got him into turn 3 at the inside, and that was P2 for Martin, done. Ogura, on the other hand, was chasing Marc, and I think they were 6th or 7th at the time, And Ogura suffered his first crash of the season on a Sunday into Vale corner. Now you ask what happened to Ogura. Was it his fault? Yes, even he said it was in typical Ogura fashion, even he said it was a rider error. Pushing a bit too much, being a bit too greedy on that front brake into Vale, which is a tight left-hander, low gear in these bikes, and just dropped the front into the gravel and out of the race he went. That in turn, not only did take Ogura out of the race, it also lost him second place in the standings, which returns to Marco Bezzecchi, who's back in second, fulfilling that factory Aprilia 1-2 in the rider standings right now. But it did become a race of attrition. I'm just looking at the names here. So you had Rins and Mir out. They were out. Mir again out on lap 1. That's 2 retirements. Bastianini retired from the race. He fell off. I don't actually remember Bastianini's one. That I think sums up Bastianini's season. No one knows what happened to him. He was just wet. That's 3. Ike Lacrona crashed out with was it with the Morbidelli clash, or was that? No, that was on the Saturday. He clashed with Morbidelli and crashed out the sprint race. He failed to finish the Grand Prix on Sunday. Cal Crutchlow failed to finish the Grand Prix on Sunday. Bagnaia failed to finish. I'll go into his crash later on. His weird front end loss on the exit of, I think, Woodcote, or going into Woodcote, exit at Luffield, which is even stranger to crash there. And then Ogura, so that's 7 retirements at the field, only 16 finished, which in the end, although Fabio Quartararo finished in 12th, with a penalty for his tyre pressure system not working, he got a penalty, dropped out to 16th, the only non-finishing point scorer. Now, although you can say Fernandez was perfect on the Sunday, he didn't put a foot wrong. Over the line, he led by 2 seconds, but if he continued to push for the remainder of laps and then go conservative at the end, it would have been about 4 seconds. He got the lead early. No one could match his pace. When Martin got into second and began to push Fernandez, Fernandez perfectly responded how he needed to, built the gap up, and that's why he could afford to be cautious in the last few laps, because he built the gap up. Perfect by Fernandez, a perfect weekend for Aprilia. And Martin then also walks away from the weekend winning the sprint race, having a pole position, and second in the main race. Now bear in mind, Martin is leading the rider standings at the minute, and he's just boosted his chances of a second world title with this sort of weekend where his rivals have faltered and dropped points. It's exactly what Martin needed. For me, the hero of the weekend is Marco Bezzecchi. You might be wondering why. Am I biased towards Bezzecchi because I met him on Thursday? Yes, I am. Right, he was a very nice lad. He smelled very good, and I told him that he smelled wonderful. You saw he could do a time attack lap, but you saw at the end of every session he's clutching his shoulder, and he's got a big limp on. Now, if you don't remember, he had the big off in Assen, and then a bigger off in Germany a couple of weeks later, where he broke his collarbone. So he's had surgery before that little summer break they had. He came back this weekend, first race, still doing rehab for his collarbone, where the plate is in. He's also missing a bit of bone on his knee, so he's also limping. And somehow he got third in the sprint race, through gritted teeth. And after the sprint race, he couldn't take his helmet off. You could see there was, the physical pain he's in, there was tears. Now the tears is the pain mixed with the emotion, mixed with the adrenaline of how much this job and this sport means to them. And there in turn was the tears of Marco Bezzecchi that we all saw after the sprint race. And there was me thinking, I like Bez. He's going to be a massive pain on Sunday. I don't see him really getting a good result after the first 10, 12 laps. Bear in mind, he's in this condition after the sprint race, which was 10 laps, and the Sunday race is 20. Well, I was wrong. On the Sunday, he got into the top 3 early on. He stayed there. Alex Márquez did pass him, and Bezzecchi decided not to fight against him, which was probably the right call, because Alex Márquez was very fast. But then Alex Márquez made a mistake going into turn 1. Abbey went wide and gifted it back to Bezzecchi. Now, I thought once Márquez repasses Acosta and goes back to P4, he's going to close the gap on Bezzecchi again for P3. But he couldn't. He did close the gap a bit, of course, and got within, I think, 7 tenths there of him for quite a few laps, those two. Yes, so he caught Bezzecchi again, got within 6 tenths. But with the last 5 laps, which I thought Bezzecchi would struggle the most, he pulled out his best laps of the race. Somehow. No idea how he did that. But he managed to pull out his fast laps of the race, kept that gap to Alex Márquez, and secured P3. What was a hero P3, considering all he went through, the pain he was in. As we said, that we saw the tears from Saturday. So imagine what he would have been like on Sunday evening, where he probably didn't move. Speaking of, as I said, we had we met him on Thursday when we had the meet and greet for Bezzecchi. Got a signed hat, a couple of us did. I managed to bring a couple of friends as well to get some Aprilia merchandise and get a signed thing, a picture of Bezzecchi, and he was very nice. So I think we had a group of us really supporting Bezzecchi on that Sunday, and we're happy to see him get the podium. I can't even imagine the pain he was in, and it's so weird to see. When we met him on Thursday, he was just on this table on his own, signing things. Looked like a very peaceful, kind human. Very human Bezzecchi as well, actually, because we went to the press conference as well, which is Dulwich Dishwater. But he got a good ovation. He thanked the whole crowd. You can tell he's a nice lad, a very polite, well-mannered person. As I said, very human. And then we saw him on Sunday going past us at 200 mile an hour, going into turn 1, doing that for his day job in that pain. And just the reversal of characteristics between him off the bike on this random Thursday to on the bike is why I admire these riders so much, is why I think they're just different humans. There's something in their brains that we don't have, or there's something in our brains that we have that they don't, which is why they're able to do this exact thing for a job. But yeah, one thing I will mention is the next note I've wrote down here is about Marc Marquez and Ducati. So away from the Aprilias dominated. Hell of a weekend for them. Bezzecchi, hero of the weekend for me. Behind them, you had Alex Márquez on the Gresini Ducati, really outperforming the factory Ducatis. We'll get into the Acosta. As I said, Acosta finished in 5th behind them. Again, a fantastic result for Acosta. Antonio again, satellite Ducati in 6th and Marquez in 7th. It's odd how, and Bagnaia can agree, because Bagnaia said it in the interviews after the race, after he fell off again. It's odd how the satellite bikes have got a better handle on this Ducati than the factory team. When it comes to setup, when it comes to tyre degradation, when it comes to grip, everything, the satellites are more comfortable with the bike than they are. And that's fascinating. Now, we said Marquez destroyed his rear tyre in the sprint race, which again, even for Mark, is very strange to do. After lap 3 in the sprint race, he had no pace at all, was fighting for the top 3, ended up finishing 9th, and with 3 more corners would have been a lot worse than 9th. And it was due to a destroyed rear tyre. And he said he felt after lap 3 it's about surviving. And there was multiple times in the sprint race where the bike really tried to throw him off. So much so that one coming out of Beckett's into Chapel onto hanging straight the bike at the moment, threw Mark in the air. When he landed back on the bike, his airbag went off in his suit. So we had to do 2 laps with the airbag going off. Secured 9th, so it's a couple points in the sprint race, which is better than none. But it was a weird weekend where he felt comfortable on a time attack lap, in his words. He felt comfortable on a qualifying lap. And could have fought for the front row. He started 6th in the end, but he could have fought for the front row. But there was a piece of bodywork on the track, so there was the flashing yellow and red flag with a little crossing saying there's something on the track. And he just saw the yellow and confused it for a yellow flag, so he backed off. When, in reality, it wasn't a yellow flag, so he backed off his lap for no reason, and he was on a good lap. So he started 6th in the end. And then the tyre deck happened on Sunday, and you had that thought, and Ducati thought, how are they going to avoid that for the main race 20 laps on the Sunday? He managed, I think, the whole race, because of this issue that happened the day before and just how Marquez dropped like a stone. His last lap in the sprint race was 4.9 seconds slower than his fastest lap in the sprint race. That's the level of tyre drop we're talking about. Which in turn put his strategy for Sunday already out the window, because he had to survive the Sunday race, remember. He had to now think, from lap 1, he has to take care of his rear tyre, meaning he's going to have no pace. So after he did the class move on Ogura and Martin in turn 3, they both went wide on the exit of turn 3. Marquez judged this and guessed they're going to do that. Cut for the exit of turn 3, got them both on the inside of turn 4, short shifted down the back straight, he goes into 3rd. That only lasted 3 corners, then they all got past him. Ogura couldn't get past him before his drop, which was interesting. But Martin passed him, Acosta passed him with a great move down the inside of turn 1, Abbey, where you don't normally see overtakes, and he gave Mark not a shove, but it was that sort of move down the inside where Mark had to go wide, because Acosta was having that corner. And now Mark will remember that for next year, Pedro, but that's going to be entertaining to watch and great to watch for those two. But Pedro got him there, and then Antonio got him just a few laps left, so Mark dropped down to 7th, as we said, like a stone. But I mentioned it earlier, yes, it was a dreadful weekend, similar to Assen, and arguably worse actually than Assen for Mark in the end. No idea how it ended up being worse than Assen, because everyone thought for him that's quite a bad weekend, but he hated the weekend. But he's learnt this mentality now where it's more important to just finish 7th and accept you're in 7th, and take home those points, then pushing for higher, and getting 0 points. Because that could have been worse for Martin after the great results for Martin. He's gone from 18 points to now 40 points behind, which you might think, that's quite a big gap, that's quite a big jump. Yes, it is quite a big jump. But Mark has closed the gap from 100 points to was 18. And now it's 40. Now you might ask, what's the next track? The next track is Aragon. Now who is the favourite at Aragon every year because of the left-handers? It's Marc Marquez. The odd thing is, Marquez said that the pace is due to him. So he did this all season before the Le Mans incident, before his recent surgery, where he would not blame the team, he would not slate the bike, he would say the lack of pace is the physical limitations he now has. He knew he was going to struggle in Silverstone. He's only won at Silverstone once in his career anyway. So he wasn't a favourite at all heading into this weekend. It was a short, Marquez loves to talk, right? That's why part of the reason why a lot of people love him. He loves to talk. It was a very short briefing from him in the media, very short, saying it was his physical limitations. They knew early on they got to maintain the tyres, and he said the other Ducatis were able to do it and finish ahead of him, so it's something he was doing. Which I am not having. I don't believe that. I think yes, the physical limitations are there, of course, and only he knows how he's working around that every weekend, depending on what track they're at. I don't think you can put the factory Ducati performance down to Mark's physical limitations from this weekend, considering he could have got them and would have got there on the front row. If they had the tired day like Aprilia, I don't think he would have won. He wouldn't have beat the Aprilia, but he would have been fighting for the podium probably. Or most likely he would have been fighting for the podium. And it was very obvious from early on in the race, even from being there, you could see he has no grip at the rear tyre. Then you ask, where was Pecco Bagnaia, for example? Well, Pecco Bagnaia, this is Mark's teammate, remember, who is leaving to go Aprilia next year. But Pecco Bagnaia was out in Q1. He was 6th in Q1, so that's 16th on the grid. Nowhere in the sprint race. And then he had a strange crash on the Sunday. And he was nowhere anyway before he had the crash on Sunday. And he said it himself how bad this weekend was and how it's wrong the factory team is struggling more with the setup than the satellite bikes. Then Gresini, look at Alex Márquez's pace, which was podium worthy if it wasn't for the mistake. This is where I think it's Márquez is the psychological king, and him saying it's his physical limitation is him being that psychological king at work. So then when Ducati next win and when Mark next wins, all he's going to do is praise the bike and not praise him. So he wants people to underestimate Marc Marquez. Which, if you're smart enough, you never underestimate Marc Marquez. But the Ducati problem has now become a public conversation because everyone can see this weekend really the disparity between the factory Ducatis was stunning, but not stunning in a good way. Bagnaia's crash coming out of Luffield, I think it's Luffield. Normally when a crash happens at Luffield, it's where Mir crashed and Rins crashed a lap on with each other. You'll lose it on the entry, or often they lose it mid-corner when they're about to touch the throttle to get the front on. That's when the front slips mid-corner. Pecco Bagnaia lost it on the exit. He'd done Luffield, had come out of Luffield, and he was on the throttle, about to pick the bike up to go back into Woodcote, and then the front went, which could have been very bad for him, actually. I've never seen a bike crash on the exit of Luffield before. I've seen many crash on the mid part of Luffield. I think Pecco Bagnaia did that last year, or the year before, crashing at the midpoint of Luffield. Never seen someone crash on the exit, which is a very, very weird crash, and Pecco Bagnaia now has gone public with that in interviews, explaining how weird the bike is and what's happening is weird. Now, of course, he's going Aprilia, so Ducati's focus is going to be Marc Marquez, and really it's the first time this year that Marc, since his surgery really, hasn't been able to work around what's happening on the bike to bring home a better result, because even he said after the race, 5th place is a achievement for them this weekend, and even he couldn't get 5th place, and if anyone could, it's him. And he wasn't happy with 7th. You can see in what Marquez was saying. He was not happy with 7th. He wasn't happy with the weekend. Of course he wasn't. He is Marc Marquez. And it really nailed home the fact that Ducati aren't, yes, they're the powerhouse, but they're not the leading dogs in MotoGP anymore. That baton has really been passed to Aprilia, which I think is clear to see it's passed to Aprilia. Especially at tracks like this, where when Ducati have a weak weekend, they can't even fight for the end of the podium. They're nowhere near the Aprilias. When the Aprilias have a weak weekend, you're still going to see an Aprilia on the podium. If that makes sense to you, then you know exactly what I'm saying. If that doesn't make sense, I'll try to explain it easier. When Aprilia having a bad weekend, their results on a bad weekend is still a lot better than Ducati's results on a bad weekend. Now I'm saying factory Ducati, because it's odd. It's not a pressure thing. It can't be a pressure thing. But these two riders, Marquez and Pecco Bagnaia, they're past the pressure things. Pecco's got no pressure on him. He's got the Aprilia contract signed. His bike actually for next year, or if it was, it's not the same bike because of the new regulations, but his seat got 1st and 2nd and pole position, so he's got no pressure. Mark might think he has pressure, but frankly he doesn't. No one's going to blame Marquez, but him again going back to his physical limitations, which he hasn't done for a while, I find interesting, because to me it's obvious it wasn't that, it was the bike. He has to, as we said, adjust to his body position, his riding style every race. He even said that before coming into this weekend. He has to change his riding style every race because of his right arm. He doesn't really have a right arm functioning anymore, which is sad when you hear him say that. But you watch what he's able to do. He would have put on the front row if it wasn't for the yellow flag. He would have been fighting if the tyre, or if the Ducati could hold its rear tyre. But the whole race, instead, he spent trying to save the rear tyre. He got done by, I think the Acosta one he'll remember. It wasn't a shove by Acosta, it was a perfect move by Acosta into turn 1. But that's not something Mark will forget, and Mark won't forget this weekend. And he's probably already looking straight ahead to Aragon, where he is going to be heavy favourite of all the left-handers. Now, last year, if you remember, he got pole position, he won the sprint race, he won the main race on the Sunday. That's 37 points. If that happens again and Martin struggles, Marquez is back within 20 points. One thing I did find interesting was Bezzecchi's a fan favourite now. There's a lot of Bezzecchi fans, a lot of Bezzecchi merchandise. Of course, I was wearing them. I got Bezzecchi hat signed, but that was here. I was wearing my red Ducati Mark hat, because I'm a little nerd. And a lot more Marc Marquez merchandise than I've seen before, and a lot less Rossi merchandise than I've seen before. That was interesting to me. And the thing is with Marquez and the fans is there's still that hatred for him by quite a lot of people. You have the ones wearing the Mark fan when they understand his greatness, and this is where I sit on greatness. Love him or hate him. Same with anyone in sport. Love them or hate him. You cannot deny greatness when it's slapping you in the face. Marquez has been doing that for years. Slapping everyone in the face. whether it's intentional or not, with his crown, with his greatness. There are still TNT set a mic up somewhere. I didn't see it when I was there, but I saw the clip on social media afterwards, where people would say their controversial opinion, that sort of crap. Now, the problem with controversial opinions is you get people saying things just to try and get a reaction. But a lot of them was about how Márquez will never touch Rossi's legacy, which to me is fascinating how that's still being brought up. Rossi hasn't raced in 5 years in MotoGP. Márquez is past that instant between. It was 11 years ago. He doesn't care anymore. And even now, people bring it up without provocation, without being provoked to say it, which I find fascinating. He's Marmite. He splits people down the middle. People love him or people hate him. There's no, oh, he's okay. And there was someone said Alex is better than Mark, which I found laughable. No respect, Alex is phenomenal. No disrespect to Alex Márquez. I'm going to say this to the camera because I'm happy to say my opinion. No one gets near Marc Márquez, and that's a fit Marc Márquez, and that's an injured Marc Márquez. The only one who will get near on equal machinery will be Pedro Acosta. Now I see people are starting to look at Pedro Acosta. Oh, he's a bit too shiny. Rah, rah. He's got the Wolverine beard and the mullet. Good, keep doing it. Keep being Pedro Acosta. Get on that Ducati next year, and I want to see Márquez via Acosta because they're the two for me. They're all aliens. Actually, I take that back. Look at Bezzecchi, what he did with gritted teeth. Big up Marco Bezzecchi. They are a world above. I don't mean that they're so much better than everyone else. They're from a different planet. These aliens are from this one mold of a world, and then you got Márquez and Acosta who are from the aliens to the aliens. If you understand what I'm saying there. But I mentioned Acosta, so let's talk about it quickly. He did secure 5th place for the KTM, which didn't break down this weekend, which is a positive. And 5th on the KTM. Again, he was the only KTM worth mentioning. Brad Binder did finish in the top 10. He was in 8th place, which for Binder and for any other KTM is a very good result. I'm trying to pick up the gap. He was 12.7 seconds behind Márquez, who in turn was 3 seconds behind Digi, who was about 10th off Pedro. So let's round it nearly 15 seconds off Pedro Acosta was Brad Binder. But hey, that's 2 KTMs in the top 10. It's a good result for them. But yes, again, Pedro Acosta, phenomenal. Had a bad start and had to fight his way back through. He passed Ogura into Stowe, a great move late on the brakes into Stowe and Ogura, and they fought on the exit as well, which was good to see. We spoke about the hell of a move he did on Marc Márquez into turn 1 into Abbey, we had a great view of it as they shot past us, however fast they're going, and we were at the exact point when they started to lift up and hit the brakes, and I was interested to see who was going down 1 gear and who was going down 2, because a lot of them was going down 2 gears, and I think I heard that Raul Fernandez kept going down only 1 gear for Abbey, but Acosta, you see him put alongside Marc out the corner. I bet Marc's really struggling with the rear grip here, so Marc goes to the right to go a bit defensive because he can hear where Acosta is. Acosta, when they hit the brakes, Marc hit the brakes later than Pedro actually, and we had a great view of it. And you see them both dangle their leg out, and then Acosta just eased off that brake, put Márquez wide, got the position, managed to stay in front of Digi Antonio, who was fast at the end, was Digi. Managed to stay in front of him by just under 1/10 over the line, secured 5th place. And it came up this weekend that KTM, the teams have agreed for KTM to kind of look into their reliability problems now, purely because it's dangerous. We've seen the instance this year where they broke down on the straight on the fastest parts of the circuit, and before this weekend, the teams, not all of them agree that they can, because normally the engines, you can't touch them in the season, you can't go into it to modify it. They've agreed they can look into it, and because they fix it, because I think they've realised the KTM breaks down and your rider's behind it, your rider's getting badly hurt, look at Alex Márquez in Catalonia, and your bike's blowing up. So I don't understand why there were such disagreements to not let them look inside the engine on safety concerns. However, they have now. What do you do? Acosta 5th place. He was funny in the press conference because someone asked about if he wants to take his first win in MotoGP on the KTM. And I was like, is he meant to say no to that or something? But anyway, that's that question. That's the thing with those public press conferences, which is fine. Good. I bottled asking a question, so who am I to speak? And then we mentioned Digi Antonio, who finished 6th in the end. Again, a bad qualifier from Digi, a bad start. Quietly worked his way up into the 7th and pulled away from Binder. And you saw in like 7-8 laps to go, or 6 or 7 laps to go, I'm doing the meme, I'm changing Nick, 5 to 6 laps to go. He was starting to eke into that gap to Márquez every lap. There's only 1 lap, he was 7/10 quicker, and you're like, he'll get him. Perfect move into turn 3 on Marc, lined him up coming out of turn 1 and turn 2. That was the position done easy. Marc didn't fight it because he knew he couldn't. And that was that. You may be wondering where was the stinky Yamahas. Let me read it out. 12th and 13th was Fabio Quartararo, Jack Miller. 15th, 16th was Toprak and Fernandez. Toprak beat by Paul Espargaro, who is the KTM test rider, which is not good for Toprak at all. I know he's here for next year, but I'm a big fan of Toprak. I think he's entertaining. Not his best performance for the tyre drop-off on these Michelin tyres. He's probably begging for the Pirelli tyres, but they are stinky. However, he will be promoted to 14th. Because as we said, Fabio Quartararo, although crossed the line in 12th, nowhere near anyone else. His tyre pressure system, the system itself wasn't working. So he actually got penalised 16 seconds, like he had the tyre pressure wrong anyway, and finished 16th. So in the end, the weekend meant nothing to him. But Yamaha and Fabio, I think, is used to that right now. That's why he's going to Honda next year. But before we get into the championship standings, as I said, it was quite a dull week. It was dull races. The sprint race wasn't that exciting. The main race wasn't that exciting. It's exciting when you're there because it has to be experienced to see these riders and see these bikes. Even if the race is dull, you're not bored when you're there watching them come past you every lap because there's something different. You can't describe what these bikes are, but nothing much happened really in the race. A couple overtakes here and there. I did find weird, I'm going to get this next, but I did find weird during the press conference how the main advertised thing for MotoGP was the crashes. I don't know if I agree that should be the main thing advertised for MotoGP, because MotoGP has many, many fantastic things to offer for motorsport. And that I want to touch on very quickly. I just want to get the championship stands out of the way before we go into that, because I'll talk for a bit on that, I believe. As we said, Ogura and Martin leads still, 240 points. He is now 31 points ahead of his teammate Marco Bezzecchi, who returns to second place despite his injuries. Again, big up Marco Bezzecchi. It's weird how Martin's top with just one win on a Sunday this season, whereas Bezzecchi's got 4. And Martin's got less podiums. Bezzecchi's got 7. But it was Bezzecchi's first podium since Mugello. I think it was Mugello. His first podium since, so he's the return to form he needs. Ogura with his crash at Vale chasing Márquez, dropped him down to 3rd. Only 37 points off. Now, of course, of Silverstone, everyone's talking about the championship standings, the top 5 or 6 being within, 22 points or something, which is crazy. Silverstone has now taken 12 winners in 12 races, 12 different winners in 12 races. Fernandez has gone to 6th, or remains 6th, I don't remember if he was there before, on 184 points, only 56 points off. And Pedro Acosta is now 7th, who believes he's not far off the fight for the top 3, because with Ogura on 103 points, what is he, 40 points off Ogura? Which he's telling the truth. He's not far off the top 3 at all. I don't know how he's that close, considering the bike he's on, but hey-ho. And you got Marc Marquez in 4th, now 40 points off of the lead. 3 wins, 8 podiums for 3 wins, 3 podiums, it says. Is every podium for Marquez this year been the top step? I did not know that. There you go. 3 wins, 3 podiums. And Di Giannantonio in 5th, just 1 point behind Marc. Win 199 points. But as you said, with Aragon coming up in a couple of weeks, that could all change because Marc Marquez is the favourite for the Aragon Grand Prix. I'm talking about being there and why it has to be experienced, because we had a couple of people along. My missus was one of them who came along. We brought her along for our first MotoGP race, actually for a birthday present for my dad, and we brought one of his friends. And they've never seen it live before. They've only got into it this year, and I've managed to get a couple of people who I know to watch it this year, because it's a sport that deserves to have eyes on it, because it's incredible to me. I love MotoGP with everything. And because I love MotoGP, this is why I don't think the advertisement for the crashes is correct. When we was at the Tottenham Court Road press conference, all the big screens around it, when they're showing it on the ceiling, on the walls, are mainly the big crashes. And the part of me was like, I don't think that should be the main thing advertised in MotoGP. I think it's got, as I said before, so many things to offer, so many great racing to offer, especially next year when we get rid of this stupid aero, or a lot of this aero, and the ride height devices. Focus on what MotoGP can offer, which isn't the injured riders. It's the show, it's the noise, it's these big bikes, it's the adrenaline you get. Yes, you see him for 3 seconds a lap, but the adrenaline you get from those 3 seconds is just worth it. And being in that grandstand alone, it can't be explained. You have to experience the feeling of the noise, especially when they come out the garage and you hear the revs, and then the session starts, and they have to go to the grid or the warm up when the warm up starts, and you hear all these bikes. And then when my favourite part was when they're on the grid, all the lights are on, clutching, they're all 4 revs. It's like a thunderclap has just hit you. You feel the vibration. The lights go out, they drop the clutch, they pull away, and you hear this crack of noise go past you. It's incredible. Nothing can do MotoGP justice more than seeing it live. You see him at full speed, you see him on the angle, you see him on the turn, you see him on the brakes, everything. They come out of, so we were just basically we're opposite the Ducati garage actually, so just past the main finish straight. So we can see him coming out of the exit club, and we see him go down the main straight to Termont Abbey. That's quite a bit of stretch, that's quite a stretch of tarmac. Take us about 20 minutes to walk it. They come out of club, you can see him on the lean, at full lean coming out of club, really out at full throttle. They take the exit curb, down the main straight, but when they come out of club and approaching Abbey, that might be 3 seconds worth that they've done just like that, gone. And they see him lean into Abbey, and the lean they go into Abbey is so much more than you think on TV. It really has to be experienced live. There isn't a sport, I don't think, that translates. It looks incredible on TV, and yet it still translates poorly on TV compared to real life. I don't think there's a sport that gets near it live, in my opinion. Nothing gets near it. When you hear it, you feel it. That's what Formula 1 lacks now, is the noise. If you heard an F1 car coming before, you can hear the bikes before you see them. You can't do it with F1 anymore. You only hear an F1 car when the bloody Hoover electric thing is in front of you. A MotoGP bike, you can hear it when it comes out of stow and breaks into Vale, and you can hear the gear changes, and then suddenly it thuds past you. It's incredible. It was also good to see the crowd numbers. So I've gone Silverstone for MotoGP in 2021, which was popular because it was Valentino Rossi's last race, and I've been now in 24, 25, 26. 24 and 25, the numbers were visibly going down, and the lack of activities away from the grandstand, away from the track, was noticeable. This year was definitely an improvement. I saw some people saying, oh, the numbers are nowhere near F1's. They're not going to be, because MotoGP has more actual fans watching the sport for loving the sport, not what Formula 1 advertises as Formula 1 nowadays. But to have these numbers and these grandstands that, okay, weren't fully full, but compared to the year before and the previous year, a healthy amount, and the food trucks and the fan zone bit that we saw and walked past, busier than it's been in recent years, and for me that's good to see. MotoGP deserves to have this sport growth. I just hope they grow this audience and they grow the sport in the correct direction. And now that Liberty Media have got their hands on it, I slightly fear, because I don't know what they've done with Formula 1. But anyway, that's just my opinion. What I will say is the press conferences are just as boring in person as they are on TV, or where you read them. So we went to the Tottenham Court Road live press conference, as we said, on Thursday. We had Cal Crutchlow, Pedro Acosta, Ogura, Diego Moreira, Crutchlow, Bezzecchi. No, sorry, it was set from right to left. Crutchlow, Acosta, Ogura, Bezzecchi, Moreira. And they had some bikes there as well. Just as dull. Great. So the media asked some questions. Gavin emptied the thing. They inducted Barry Sheen into the Hall of Fame, and his son was there to take it as well. Something almost, if he had long hair, be a spitting image of Barry Sheen as well. Only his name's Freddie, and instantly I think, because I've seen James Hunt's son, Freddie Hunt, who looks a spitting image of James Hunt, so that's always weird to me. And you could tell the riders don't like it. Acosta came on with a face to thunder. Yes, they liked the ovation from the crowd, and the crowd were good with him, and they were good with the crowd, and gave pictures and signatures when they could. Acosta got a kid with a Rossi shirt, put him on his KTM, because you had Acosta's KTM, you had Mir's Honda, Fabio's Yamaha, and Bezzecchi's Aprilia were there as well. But you can tell the riders still aren't used to this sort of thing in public doing this. They arrived in a black cab and had the photo shoot. Acosta arrived and faced the thunder into the press conference, which was quite funny to me. That's what I found most entertaining, was seeing how much they do hate it. Ogura makes me laugh because his answers are so vague and vivid. He doesn't really care about his answers. Someone asked him, can he win this weekend? He goes, probably not, because I'm not good at Silverstone. Gavin asked, do you enjoy Silverstone? Ogura went, no, which again made me laugh. But I like that honesty in a rider. One thing I'll say quickly is I do fear for Ogura going next year to the Yamaha, as I hope I'm wrong. I just don't have confidence that Yamaha can actually give or provide Ogura with a bike that he needs to have, a bike that Aprilia have given him on the Trackhouse this year. It might be a backward step for Ogura. Obviously not payment-wise. He's now a factory rider next year, so he don't have to work another day in his life. But I'm not sure Yamaha can provide what he needs. But back to what Thursday was. After that event, we went to, just next door on Tottenham Court Road, there was a bike sim. No, I've never done a bike sim. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, I have to go with it. And in front of us was the, what was his name? Max something. Griffiths, I think, where he did, it was there on Sunday at the race doing the Hero Walk interviews. That guy who does the interviews. And I recognised him from the Instagram clips, because I've seen him talk about MotoGP and F1, and I couldn't remember his name. And they were on the bike in front of me. And because I knew he's doing work on MotoGP, I thought, well, his time's going to be good. And on the bike sim, I think he did a 2-minute 1 or something. And I was like, oh god, yeah, I'm the one in queue has to follow him up. Okay, fine. Because they look nice and flashy, and I was like, okay, fine, there's someone who they know. So I got on the bike sim. And one of the best fun times I had last week was on that bike sim. You get a lap. I got a lap and a half because I was pretty bloody good at it. And instead of moving with the lean, you have to move with the handlebars like this, and the bike will lean with you. And it was incredible just for me to do the... It's the first time I've probably done the throttle control and had to grab the brake lever on a bike that can simulate this sort of thing. I don't want to brag. There was only one person the entire day who went under 2 minutes of a lap around Silverstone, and it was me with a 1:58.2. Most people got one lap in if they finished it. I got a lap and a half in, and my second lap would have been seconds quicker, and I would have been fighting for Martin's pole time because I was now learning how to trail brake properly before the time cut out. But I was very good. Followed the sim guy on Instagram, hoping he'd give me a free one. He's not going to give me a free one because I asked how much it was, and it was £30,000. I don't have that. But, you know, I don't want to brag. But I've said in some sim racing clips I might be the greatest of all time, and I've proved my point there. But that was good. But then after that, we went to the Bezzecchi meet and greet. Now, I got tickets because I know I have a very good friend who runs the store he was in, the New Era store in near Oxford Street, Carnaby Street. And there Bezzecchi was, sitting in the back on his lonesome. I kind of knew he was a nice guy because he had a very good reaction to when the crowd gave him a round of applause and cheered him after he said he'd returned from his injury. And he was just sitting there peacefully on his signings thing. I already knew the pain he's in, so I didn't want to take too much of his time because it's weird, these meet and greet things. They're very odd. And I was sitting there, and I always wonder in this situation, what would I say to him? Because there's so many questions I want to ask him. I'd love to have a full-on conversation with them. And I should have, really. Because I noticed he looked tired, because I think the night before I got told they delayed the event because he had to do rehab the night before for his collarbone and knee, obviously. So I was like, okay, he probably isn't in the mood at the minute to do a proper full-depth, in-depth conversation. The bikes, the tracks. There's so many questions I want to ask, but when you're going at full speed, or when the front goes from you, and then I walked up to him, and I started going, Marco, Marco, Marco. And he's like, si. So I instantly knew it was a different interaction than he's had previously. And he instantly went to sign a hat. He was in automatic signing mode. I remember turning around to the people with me and I was like, he smells delicious. It's him and Acosta that smell lovely, because they do. I know it's a weird thing to pick up, but they do smell very nice. And he looked at me and I could tell he was trying to figure out what I said with my accent, because I've got the Essex London and I speak fast. And then he clocked on. And he was like, oh, good. And I was like, yeah, it smells delightful. He was like, oh, better. And he told me what it was. And I was like, I forgot what it was. But I was like, I said to him, I can't afford that. And he laughed and said something like, neither can he, they just spray it on him. And I was like, you can definitely afford it. But yeah, that kind of made me relax his shoulders a bit and gave him a nice smile on the picture I had with him. Yeah, it made my day, meeting this first MotoGP rider I've met. And to me, MotoGP riders are just absolute kings of the world. So I was amazed I didn't faint when I saw him. But that was a highlight of the week. And then added it into, as why I was rooting for him at Sunday to get that podium as well. So he's made me a bigger Bez fan than I was before. I slated Bez a couple of times this podcast because of his mistakes. I wanted to see how he could handle the pressure when Mark came back. He made the mistakes. He's dropped the points. Seeing him recovering, seeing him in the pain and the tears he was in, to then come through on the Sunday again and get third was, frankly, remarkable to watch. So up the Bez. Alas, that'll be that. Now you might be wondering, anything to do with Formula 1? No. While Formula 1's away for the summer break, I don't want to talk about Formula 1, frankly, unless it's to do with the old bit of Formula 1, which we're going to do in other features in other podcasts. But there is no racing this weekend. There's the first race MotoGP, the first one we've had in 2 weeks, I think, with all motorsport, well, the ones we watch being Formula 1 and MotoGP. MotoGP returns in 3 weeks in Aragon, around the same time, maybe a week later when F1 returns as well in Zandvoort. But as we said before, this is purely about MotoGP for now. Aragon in 3 weeks, Márquez will be the favourite. Silverstone, although it's a dull race for me, it was a weekend to remember for reasons kind of beyond the racing. It's one of the first times in MotoGP since I started this podcast and this brand that I haven't been able to live stream and commentate the sprint race over the race. That was weird not to do it, but anyway. We will be live on Twitch this week for different sim racing things, I imagine. So if you're not following that, subscribe to Apex to Apex Pod on Twitch. The Instagram is Apex to Apex Podcast. That's Instagram, Spotify, and YouTube. We'll have this episode out on all those three. Well, not Instagram. It'll be a clip on Instagram, but obviously Spotify and YouTube this week. Hopefully soon, before Wednesday. So it could be Monday night. Probably not Monday night, because that's now. So either Tuesday or Wednesday, that'll be out on there. And of course, as I said, the Twitch. What I'm gonna try and do is, I've noticed people they interact with me now, but they don't debate with me. I'm trying to get people to debate with me about Formula 1, MotoGP, any of the sort. So I'm thinking of inviting people on, whether that be in person, probably not in person, or whether that be over a Zoom call, Discord call, something like that, who I know them and I know they have either a bit of interest or a lot of interest, and they can talk about it, and I'm going to ask them questions. Some friends of mine, to get them on the podcast, have a conversation with them, and then let's see what questions I can do to either prod them to debate with me, or teach them some things if they need it, or just talk about the motorsports in general. I have a couple people on my list, a couple of friends of mine who could be willing to do it, so that could be a thing to look for in the future with podcast episodes in the next few weeks. However, I will leave it there. Again, thank you for listening. I know we've been a bit short on content recently. We had a bit of a week off, so we're getting back in the swing for podcasts, we're getting back in the swings for sim racing. As I said, the sim racing clips are on Twitch, or the sim racing streams are on Twitch, Apex Pod. Follow and subscribe that one. And the clips for the podcast and sim racing go up on Instagram, Apex Podcast on that. One more time on Spotify and YouTube. Make sure you follow, subscribe to all of those platforms. And I will leave you, as we always do, with the punchline, which is the race is just a punctuation. I'll see you very soon.